guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutritional information. I wanted to talk a little bit about melatonin today. Now, most people who have been in and around nutrition will have heard of melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that is produced by the pineal gland in humans, and it seems to have research is still ongoing as to exactly what melatonin does in humans and its exact role, but it seems to have a number of different functions. One of the functions is to set the circadian rhythms, and it seems to have this important role as a timer in the body clock. And that seems to be one of its major functions, but it also has other functions, and one of those other functions is actually as an antioxidant, and it does have an ability to be both a direct antioxidant. It's able to detoxify free radicals, and it also indirectly detoxifies other chemicals within cells that may cause oxidative stress. So it has an important role as an antioxidant. Now, melatonin is available as a supplement, and you can take melatonin, and it has a use. It has been researched for its ability to be able to help those people who, for example, have jet lag. If you have jet lag, your body clock becomes out of sync, and this can affect your hormone levels, and it can take a number of weeks for somebody that's passed through different time zones to actually reset their body clock. And research has shown that taking melatonin supplements may actually increase the ability of somebody to be able to deal with jet lag. So that's one of the uses of the supplements. And then supplements are also available medically, because some people, for example, may have tumours in their brain that affect their pineal gland, and some people have disease within their pineal gland that means they can't secrete melatonin, and supplemental melatonin is therefore required by some people medically in order to be able to have enough melatonin in their body so that their natural physiological reactions can occur. There was actually a very good book that was written by Dr. Michael Colgan called Hormonal Health, where he talks about the importance of melatonin as being the master hormone, and it has this ability to control all of the hormones through its ability to set the body clock, and this circadian rhythms and the timing of the circadian rhythms allow then the other hormones to be at their optimal levels. So if you haven't read that, it is quite a good book. I haven't read it for a while, but I've read it a few times, and it is a good book to read if you're interested in melatonin and how melatonin fits in with and interacts with other hormones. So that's very interesting. But some people take melatonin as a supplement, as a general sleep aid, and it does induce sleep. If you take melatonin before bedtime, there is evidence that it does actually induce sleep. And some people take melatonin as a general tonic because of its antioxidant properties. The amount of melatonin that is in your plasma, in your blood, is correlated with the general antioxidant capacity of your blood, which just goes to show that melatonin is it is a worthwhile antioxidant. It does have a significant effect on the antioxidant capacity of the tissues. Melatonin is very well absorbed. It's very bioavailable. It does increase the blood levels of animals, and it does appear to be, unlike many other substances, it does appear to be able to get into most of the organelles within the cells, and it does seem to accumulate preferentially in the mitochondria and also in the nuclei of cells, and therefore it does have some properties that other antioxidants may not have. Now, I'm not a big fan of taking melatonin as a supplement unless there is a particular reason it is required. If you do have a problem with your pineal gland, or if you do suffer from jet lag because you take a lot of long-haul flights, I can see that it would have a short-term benefit in the latter case, and a long-term medical benefit in the former case. But as a general tonic and as an antioxidant, I'm not a fan of taking melatonin in order to boost antioxidant levels. And the reason for that is because supplements tend to be available as in milligram amounts. So, you know, if you go and look at the supplements that are for sale, the average supplement will be somewhere between 3 and 10 milligrams. Let's say 5 milligrams. The blood levels of your melatonin are somewhere between 5 and 10 picograms per mil. So supplemental melatonin is very bioavailable. It does get into the blood, and it does have a significant effect on increasing the melatonin levels of your blood. And that's really why I'm not a fan of it. Melatonin is a hormone. It has this important role of resetting hormones. And that's not to say that taking melatonin is bad. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that without fully understanding the effects of melatonin and taking it, you're effectively taking a hormone that is having a cascade-like effect on all of your other hormones. In the short term, if you're, for example, having difficulty sleeping in the short term because of stress, or like I say, because you've been on a long haul flight and you have jet lag, I don't think there's anything that's going to, there's no evidence that taking melatonin in the short term is going to have any negative effects. There's no real evidence that taking supplemental melatonin in the long term will have negative effects. But is there any evidence that it will really have a positive effect? So I'm very reluctant to recommend melatonin as a supplement because it does act as a hormone and it does have these other effects. And although there are, reported beneficial effects from taking melatonin, I'm a bit reluctant to recommend it as just as a general health tonic. For specific reasons, fine. If it's well researched and you understand why you're taking it and you know what you're doing, it can have beneficial effects, and that is reflected in the nutritional literature. But as a general health tonic, I just don't think it's really going to have the miracle effect that people think it will have. And there are other safer ways to boost your health, particularly your antioxidant status. However, there is possibly a better way of improving your intake of melatonin without having to rely on dietary supplements. And this comes back to the fact that not only do animals produce melatonin, but plants appear to produce quite high amounts of melatonin in certain plants. This is chemically identical to the melatonin we produce. Originally, it was thought that only animals produced melatonin, and melatonin research was focused on animals. Then it was discovered that bacteria actually produce melatonin, and then it was found that dinoflagellates, which are protists, very small single-celled algae, photosynthetic algae, these very small organisms, many of them produce melatonin. And it was inferred that, well, if photosynthetic organisms are producing melatonin, then perhaps edible plants also produce melatonin. And subsequently research has shown that plants, many different plants, produce melatonin. And melatonin from plants may therefore be a useful source of melatonin. Now, research has looked at plants and has found that many different plants contain melatonin, and the amounts of melatonin that are produced in plants appear to be quite variable. Some studies have looked at, trying to pin down a figure as to the amount of melatonin that is in plants, and somewhere, I think as a reasonable estimate, you could say there's somewhere between 0 and 5 nanograms per gram of dry weight melatonin in plant material. That would be a rough ballpark average estimate. Obviously, some plants don't contain melatonin, or more realistically, the melatonin is at a level that's not detectable. It's very likely that all plants do produce melatonin. They're all likely to have very similar metabolic pathways, just as all single-celled algae and protists and other bacteria as well will have similar metabolic pathways. So it's probably ubiquitous within life. But obviously it's going to be produced higher amounts in certain plants, and therefore it won't be detectable in others. So it's going to vary somewhere between 0 and 5 as an average. And studies have looked at plants, and most of the plants that have been analysed for melatonin are actually edible plants, so it is produced in the plants that we eat in our diet. In particular, some of the studies have looked at herbs, and there does seem to actually be quite a high amount of melatonin in certain herbs. So, for example, the average amount of melatonin in plant material as a whole is somewhere between, let's say it's somewhere between 0 and 5 nanograms per gram of dry weight. In some herbs like St. John's wort and feverfew, the amount of melatonin may be as high as 7 micrograms per gram of dry weight. So that's almost that's 1,000 times more melatonin in certain herbs. Now, obviously, only a few herbs have been investigated, so it may be that herbs, for a particular reason, or certain herbs, concentrate melatonin. A number of researchers have also looked at the content of melatonin in seeds, and seeds also appear to have higher amounts of melatonin than other plant materials such as the roots, the stems, the leaves, the flowers and the fruits. The seeds appear to have somewhere around upwards of 100 nanograms per gram of dry weight. So that's a considerably higher amount than the rest of the plant material. And because melatonin is a very good antioxidant, and because seeds contain high amounts of polyunsaturated fatty acids, it's been speculated that the reason there is a high amount of melatonin in seeds, and a number of seeds have been investigated, celery seeds, milk thistle seeds, various seeds have been investigated, there was a higher amount of melatonin. It's been speculated that this may be because the polyunsaturated fatty acids in seeds are very susceptible to oxidation. They have a number of double bonds in their structure, and those double bonds can be attacked by oxygen, and therefore they're very susceptible to lipid peroxidation. And melatonin is a very good antioxidant. So it's been it's suspected that the melatonin content of seeds is high because of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the plant wishing to obviously decrease lipid peroxidation in seeds, because if you look at what a seed is a storage vessel for DNA, so that plant can then allow its DNA to have a latency period before it starts growing. It's protected by a seed coat. It needs everything within that seed to be completely protected from the environment, so that it can sit in the environment for upwards of years, sometimes decades, and then when the conditions are right, that seed can then germinate and produce a new plant. So it's very important that the content of that seed is not degraded by oxygen, and therefore seeds tend to be packed with antioxidants, and this is one of the reasons that melatonin might be particularly high in seeds. It's certainly, I would say, the reason that seeds are high in vitamin E. Vitamin E is a very good antioxidant at stopping lipid peroxidation, and therefore you find high amounts of vitamin E in seeds. So why not also use melatonin as an antioxidant in seeds? It makes sense. I'm not saying it's the definitive theory as to why there's high amounts of melatonin in seeds, but it does make sense to me. So these levels of melatonin in plants, they're quite modest. Remember, the amount of melatonin in plant material as a whole is somewhere between 0 and 5 nanograms per gram of dry weight, whereas the amount that you get in supplements is upwards of 1 million times more than that. It's 5 milligrams of melatonin. So it's much higher amounts in supplements than in plants. Now, is there any evidence though that if you consume melatonin from plants, that it has an effect on your melatonin levels in your blood? Because you would need, in order to get the benefits of the melatonin, it needs to get into your blood, and it needs to raise the levels of melatonin in your blood. And actually there is some evidence. This is not an area that's been extensively researched, and the work that's been done on humans is very limited. But in animals, for example, there was a study that was done on birds. When you feed birds' seeds that are high in melatonin, they do have an increase in the melatonin concentrations of their blood. So it appears that when animals do eat seeds, and they do eat, you can perhaps infer from that when they eat other foods that are high in melatonin, that their blood levels of melatonin do increase. Now, this increase is much more modest than you would get with supplements, and therefore I would suggest it's probably a safer long-term bet. If you can increase your melatonin levels, or you can simply boost your melatonin levels in your blood by consuming plant foods, this is another reason why consuming a plant food rich diet is beneficial to your health. Not all high quality diets contain lots of plant foods. There are examples of traditional diets around the world that contain very little in terms of plant foods. But generally, if we look at the traditional diets around the world, the diets that produce health in those populations that consume them regularly and consume them over generations, we find that mostly they contain a wide variety of different types of plant foods. And my videos that I've been doing have been trying to convince people that a high plant food diet is a beneficial thing to consume, and this is just one more piece of evidence, another chemical within plants, something else that is beneficial. And all these things, remember, are going to add together. There's not just melatonin as an antioxidant in plant foods. There's also vitamin E. There's also vitamin C. There's also the carotenoids, the polyphenols. They'll all work together synergistically when you consume the plant foods. So you shouldn't just see consuming plant foods as a way of boosting your melatonin levels. You should see consuming plant foods as a way of boosting all of your antioxidants, including melatonin, and that therefore I believe will have a better overall long-term health effect than consuming a single isolated antioxidant as a supplement, such as melatonin or vitamin E or vitamin C. People do get very blinkered into consuming a particular wonder nutrient, and I think the trick with nutrition is to have a very balanced diet that contains all of the nutrients you need in the right amounts, and it contains a number of different antioxidants, not just single compounds. So certainly consuming plant foods, I would suggest, although the literature is limited, but you can piece together the bits of evidence that are in the literature, and I would suggest that there is enough melatonin in plant foods to boost your melatonin levels. We know that the melatonin levels of our blood is correlated with our overall antioxidant capacity, and therefore I'd suggest that the melatonin in plant foods, if you consume plant foods high in melatonin regularly, it will have a positive beneficial effect on your antioxidant capacity by increasing the melatonin content of your blood. And I think that is a safer way, and it's a better health tonic than taking melatonin as a supplement. So I hope that was interesting. Please feel free to research this, look into it. There are some very interesting papers. I've got one in particular that I'll put the link to in the comments box below this video, so you can have a look at some of the figures and the amounts of melatonin that have been analysed in plants. Remember to eat well, stay healthy and protect yourself, and I will see you soon for another video. Take care.